Strings of Malice, Book 1, Snowflake in an Alley, An Old Mother Nonsense Story. Chapter 28, The Desert Witch. When he came to again, it was slowly. Lunreth could not remember a time he had slept so very deeply. His eyelids were crusty and his body ached in every possible way. Not eaten then after all. A warm wind caressed his blistered skin, but it was surprisingly pleasant in the shade, and it disturbed water enough for him to hear it. He listened a while. Lunreth unglued his eyes by pulling his fingers over his eyelashes a couple times. He found himself upon a bed of huge leaves in the shade of an oasis tree. The pool itself was large and inviting. A strength he did not know he had rolled him over to his hands and knees. He crawled to the edge and drank. It was blissful. No doubt what the witch had been feeding him, but he would swear it was sweeter now, the sweetest in the entire world. He drank until his belly hurt, and then, only then, did he look around to find himself alone. He sighed in relief, and then cried again when it didn't make even the softest sound. The water was clear, but the wind made it ripple. He couldn't bring himself to touch his neck. Last he'd felt it, it had been a shredded, bleeding, gaping hole, only closed and clogged by the sand that had swept him away from his pursuers, before abandoning him in the White Barrens. The memory had him scrambling to empty the contents of his stomach until he dry heaved and could taste sand once more. The process was more than his poor body could take, and the blessed black came back, this time welcomed. Maybe his dreams would be kinder than memory. He woke early enough that the cool of the night still lingered. Unfortunately, he was now well enough to feel just how utterly disgusting he was. He silently prayed to Idro for mercy as he drank slowly, pulled off his ruined clothes, and took them into the water with him. Lunreth stayed in the shallows and washed both himself and the garments of the proof of his misfortune. But there was nothing to be done about the holes in either. Both dried quickly on a rock, and he didn't dare eat the berries that grew on the low bushes. He had spotted some fruits he recognized in the trees, but he would need time to come up with a plan to get them. He doubted he could climb very well right then. He was in two minds about simply staying here. On one hand, he wouldn't survive the desert if he didn't find a way to take at least some water with him. On the other, the witch could be back at any moment, and who knew what she had in store for him. At any rate, she did not return by sunset, and at least one more day in what might just be the most beautiful place was more alluring than he could resist without consideration. Low rumbles roused the man, and he almost rolled over to return to sleep, when the thought of it being an encroaching sandstorm bolted him up fast and panicked, though the thought that he would rather drown than suffocate was quickly put on the proverbial back burner, when it came to be that the witch had returned, and she had brought someone with her. It was a man, tall and lean, with long dark hair. His face was more human than hers, but the eyes were the same and the teeth too. Lunreth had never heard of a he-witch, but suspected that was what the man had to be, for the tongue he'd been hearing from the witch spilled from his lips as though it were his own. Now that he could listen properly, it reminded him of the sound sand made, grinding over rock in a strong wind. The witch's tail flicked agitatedly, the large spikes at the end of it drawing deep grooves in the white sand near Lunreth's feet. The man's hands seemed to be imploring her, but she batted them away before gesturing harshly in Lunreth's direction. They both fell into quiet growls as they glared each other down. By the turn of her lips and the click of his tongue, Lunreth would be hard-pressed to assume that the witch hadn't won their tiff. He struggled to sit when both sets of eyes landed on him, and he scrambled back when they advanced. The witch threw her two arms up in the air exasperatedly, and snapped something at him. The he-witch swatted out her hand to stop her. She glared before turning her nose up petulantly and making for the water. She disappeared below its surface, and they were done. "You will forgive my sister," the he-witch said in the Jinran tongue as he crouched down onto his haunches before the mortal. "She is unused to not getting her way." Lunreth was sure his face showed all of his own surprise, but he couldn't reply. Instead, he unsteadily pushed himself to his feet. If this was a ploy to get him to... well, he didn't exactly know, but he felt he needed to be able to run. "She tells me you were hurt," the he-witch continued, his voice calm as a summer breeze as he tilted his head to gaze up at the human. "She says she tried to help. You will let me look. I am a much better healer than she is." He didn't move until Lunreth nodded slowly. The motion hurt something awful. The cat-like pupils ebbed as the he-witch stood up himself and moved right into Lunreth's personal space. His analysis was quick and clinical. "Like a real doctor," Lunreth had the presence of mind to think before he froze. The he-witch was growling under his breath. Then Lunreth nearly jumped out of his skin when the he-witch turned to the water with waving hands and loud, angry noises. The witch's head popped up from beneath the surface. Words were thrown around and their row was cut short when she dismissively disappeared again. Lunreth might have found the exchange humorous, if he weren't the probable cause of it. The he-witch turned back to him, no doubt cursing in their strange language, before he sighed deeply. "I am sorry for the pain my sister caused you. There is nothing I can do about the scarring, but you will let me complete the task." Though he said it like a command, he waited for a reply. When he got it, he continued, "It will be very uncomfortable. You will want to be asleep." Lunreth instantly shook his head and set his lips in a defiant line. The he-witch shrugged, "As you wish," and gestured to a rock in the shade. "Sit, it will not take long." Lunreth did as he was told, and watched as the he-witch took a small, rolled-up flap of leather from somewhere and laid it open on the rock beside him. "My sister closed your wounds, but she did not clean them," the he-witch explained, as he began tugging various vials and thin metal rods out of their places in the pouch. "I will do this so your flesh does not begin to rot from the inside." Lunreth cringed. Oh dear gods above and below, wasn't that a horrible thought? The he-witch picked up a tool, tilted Lunreth's head back, and pushed the collar up under his chin to make room. Uncomfortable was right. Very uncomfortable, as the something was pushed inside the small hole the woman had missed, and the odor of early decay tainted the air when it was removed. The process was repeated more times than either would have liked, but the he-witch finally seemed pleased enough to show his patient a sponge stained red, in contrast to the pile he'd accumulated before. Vague shades of green, black and yellow. It was gritty with sand, and the mortal guessed the witch hadn't thought past him not. Lunreth's train of thought derailed. With no more warning than a curt, "Be still," the he-witch set his mouth to the hole in the human's neck, and a hot, sticky, serpentine tongue slithered into it. It was longer than any tongue had any right to be, and panic flooded Lunreth when it began to burn, just on this side of pain. He tried to pull away, but the grip the he-witch had on his face was ironclad. He could only hold on to scaled wrists and bear with it, as his stomach turned. Gods, it felt awful, like a snake had got down into his throat. He could feel it moving around inside, between the muscle and sinew, and oh gods, no! When it brushed against his esophagus, his entire body convulsed and gagged. By the time the tongue finally left the hole, he wished he'd opted to be put out. A few more licks to the outside, and it was finally over. Lunreth only peripherally noticed the he-witch spitting, while he himself hacked up bile and water. Comforting hands pet his back to coach him through it, and a flask was handed to him once he'd stopped heaving. A bandage was placed around his neck, and he was duly informed, "You are not to remove this for 3 days. It has been soaked in salve that needs time to seep in and do its work." Lunreth nodded his understanding and drank deeply from the flask. Nazis only knew what was in it, but it tasted bitter and somewhat numbed the burn inside him. Eventually, the he-witch took the flask back and tilted Lunreth's head to the side to inspect him. Now we take care of your face. My sister says she scratched you because you were fighting her. Is that correct? She has a habit of remembering things differently to how they actually happened. Lunreth blinked up at him cluelessly. The he-witch raised an expectant eyebrow when he received no reply. You have been cut by Dragonclaw from here to here, the man told him, pointing out the start and end points on his own face. I can heal it cleanly, roughly, or you can clean it with water and let it heal on its own. It is not now endangered of infection. Lunreth opened his mouth and then closed it again when nothing came out. Oh no. The he-witch didn't seem to understand his indecisiveness, but did allow Lunreth a moment to consider while he went off to clean his tools. He returned with 2 large fruits and placed them beside the man expectantly. Lunreth hesitantly held up one finger, hoping the man would understand. Cleanly, he confirmed. Lunreth nodded. The man took up a small pouch from his tools and emptied it into his mouth. He chewed a while before spitting it back into his hand as a paste. That burn was back as he applied it over the wound. It started to tingle after a moment, and, while not painful per se, Lunreth would swear he could actually feel his skin pulling itself back together. Then the man cracked one of the fruits on the rock, twisted it, and opened it like a bowl. The flesh inside was white, with many little black seeds, and it was filled with what looked like water. Drink for energy and eat slowly, he was instructed as a small knife was placed in his hand. There is no use having it if you are only going to bring it back up. He pointed to the other fruit, still closed. There is time. You would eat both. Lunreth agreed by bringing the bowl to his lips. The clear juice was sweet, and he'd be lying if he said it didn't make him feel instantly better. It was rather uncomfortable, being watched so intently as he ate, but that would not stop him. Once or twice, the he-witch had to remind him to slow down and, well, it kind of felt nice to... Nope, he never wanted to go back to that old life. But the orders were familiar, if in a much gentler tone than he remembered. It was a nice little reprieve from having to think for himself. Lunreth knew it was something he would have to get used to. He had wanted it after all. It would just take a little time for it to become second nature. The witch only emerged from her swim again once the meal was over and the rinds, along with several seeds, were buried deep enough for the sand to be moist. She spoke to her brother, and he rolled his eyes, but seemed to comply. I will translate for her, he told his patient. Lunreth's fingers clutched at the tattered edge of his shirt. His price had come due. The woman stood tall, deliberately preening and turning in such a way that the sun rays caught and made her scales glitter, and spoke slowly in her mother tongue of wind and sand. The he-witch rolled his eyes, but the smirk that touched his lips had a genuine hint of love in it. She is Sabia the Supercilious, sister to the great Skybrazer. Lunreth would have hit the sand in his haste to bow if the he-witch hadn't predicted that he would, caught him and held him in place. No, that wasn't right. He had said that he was her brother. If she wasn't a witch, that meant he wasn't either. They were... Well, he didn't understand it. The Supercilious's next words were snide, and the man retorted back with a deadpanned expression that had her turning her nose up before continuing. She gestured frustratedly when he didn't translate right away. You will return with us to our home. He sighed after a long moment to accept his resignation to her demand. So my sister may prove to our brother that her task of helping a mortal is complete. The not he-witch huffed. She claims she is too small for you to ride. She isn't, but you will ride with me. Lunreth shrunk under the words. He swallowed roughly and shakily touched his collar before pointing at her. She looked confused, and the not he-witch beside him shook his head after a long moment of deciphering. Our horde has not kept slaves since the time the last elder gods left Cedar, he explained disgustedly. We do not have the magic to remove that without taking your head with it. But our brother may know how to keep it from being detectable any longer." Lunreth wanted to protest, wanted to tell them, but he couldn't, and his breathing shallowed as he began panicking. The dragon, caught him when he pitched forward. Lunreth pushed himself off when their feet in the sand gave him an idea. He went to his hands and knees and wrote a single word in the sand. "Dangerous." The dragon read it at his insistence, while Sabia made a comment he didn't care for. "We will do nothing to put you in danger. Be easy. My sister's task is to help a mortal. It would not do to have you killed at the 11th hour." It was less comforting than had been intended. But what other choice did he have?